Today we've seen a brand new RGG Summit with a variety of announcements being featured, so I'll take this opportunity to round up all of the relevant info and add some of my own thoughts on the event and the RGG Direct that followed. First off, the centerpiece of the event, Kiwami 3. Putting aside the fact that the community theories surrounding this project were proven to be correct, the stuff that was shown was honestly a surprise in many ways. We were shown a handful of new cutscenes that were added, like one where Suzuki was presumably being threatened by the Snakeflower Triad, and one where he personally went after Kiryu and his orphanage. Adding bits like these in could help strengthen the connection between the infamous political subplot of Yakuza 3 and the rest of the narrative, whose ties led to frequent confusion with first-time players and blessed us with a variety of Tamiya-centric memes. It was also stated that select scenes will have different resolutions than in the original, which I can only presume to be code for will address the narrative retcons from subsequent entries. On that front, I'm pretty intrigued by Kiwami 3. One bit that I'm less excited about, on the other hand, would be the face actor changes for Rikiya, Hamazaki, and Nakahara. This might be a case of just being too acquainted with the original version of the game, but it felt like each actor in OG3 nailed the characters they were given in a way that couldn't really be done by another actor. I've even felt that way towards some lesser antagonists like Kanda, for example, which, speaking of, I was pleasantly surprised to see his original voice actor returning, in stark contrast to the theories that stemmed from his seeming ties to the Yakuza from ages ago. We'll have to wait and see how the old cast and the new cast play off each other, but for now, the character model changes and Kiryu's signature shirt being changed will take some getting used to. Oh yeah, maybe the DLC for the game gives us the OG floral design back, if the description is anything to go by, but I digress. Combat-wise, in modern RGG fashion, we'll have multiple fighting styles, in this case the so-called Dragon of Dojima Kiwami and the Ryu Kyu style. The former largely feels like the DE style we've been expanding on for the last 9 years or so. We haven't seen enough to indicate whether the combo speed will be altered, which seemed to be a common point of contention for some fans, but at the very least, we can expect some brand new hit actions being added and a slightly expanded moveset, going by the bit of footage that was shown so far. The use of Dragon Boost, essentially EX Heat mode, even showcases a variety of bounding throws very prominently, which is another nice touch. Other than that, it just seems like the classic style we've been used to since Yakuza 6. By comparison, the second style essentially looks like it's drawing a lot of inspiration from the agent philosophy of combat, with a variety of unique weapons to choose from and highlighting differences between pressed or held inputs. It will give access to 9 unique weapons, like Tonfa and Nunchuk. And honestly, giving Kiryu a more weapon-oriented style in Kiwami 3 was a good call in terms of timeline consistency, considering how weapon-based combat in K2 elevated the commonly criticized beat-em-up moveset from that game. We also saw that the roster of side activities would be expanded, with Life at Morning Glory feeling like a continuation of Ishin Kiwami's farming and Pirate Yakuza's Goro Kitchen. The kids at the orphanage were given a stronger spotlight, with even dedicated sub-stories added for each of them, which was one of the many suggestions I brought up in my K3 video, so I'm glad this was included. In a similar vein to the cooking minigame, the activity called Bad Boy Dragon looks to be a combination of Gaiden's clan creator-esque bouts and the biker gang stuff from LJ, which I wholeheartedly approve of. Lastly, bowling finally arrives in the Dragon Engine, the photo booth from K1 returns, and looks like Kiryu himself, for the first time since OG Yakuza 2, will finally be a host again, which may ultimately replace OG3's activity of Hostess Maker. I'm usually against original content being cut from a remake, but that minigame in particular really didn't work for me, so I would consider this a positive. Also, Dragon Engine Okinawa is lovely, as you'd expect. Now, you likely know how I haven't been a proponent of K3 releasing before some other projects, so the highlight of today's summit for me wasn't the remake itself. Instead, it was a release that I hoped we'd get for quite a while, but never thought RGG would actually go for a number of reasons. A new Gaiden game is here, focused all around one of my favorite characters, Yoshitaka Mine. From the get-go, this entry appears to be an evolution on the initial blueprint the Gaiden games followed. It's not a self-contained entry, but is a package release with Kiwami 3, which could elevate some concerns regarding the previous spin-offs being overpriced. It broke the pattern of Gaiden games being tied to turn-based mainlines, and it lets us take control of a character who is an up-and-coming Yakuza, something that I never thought would happen again in this capacity, considering RGG's writing rules being against such a narrative premise in essence. In Dark Ties, we see an expansion on Mine's exit from the entrepreneurial world and his journey to find true bonds in the world of the Yakuza. There were no spoilers present regarding upcoming boss fights, and an emphasis was put onto the complex camaraderie and presumably growing tensions between Mine and Kanda. Everything I've seen so far has me hooked, and the bits of gameplay that were featured made it all even better. We weren't given a name for the fighting style shown, but it appears that Mine will have one core style focused on his default boxing-oriented moveset that's been prominently featured in many post-Yakuza 3 games, while his version of EX Heat, labeled Dark Awakening, will drastically alter this core basis with more brutal attacks, and maybe even throwing in some moves from his other 3 styles that he'd use in his boss fight. I'll need to slow down the footage here and compare it with Yakuza 3's for good measure. Also, he was given a mechanic that clearly takes cues from Yagami's habit of kicking off walls in both Judgment games. I wouldn't exactly call this an enemy step, as I doubt animation cancels will be jump-started by this specific move, but Mine using enemies as stepping blocks could make for some amazing long battle playthroughs, assuming the enemy numbers here are as large as in the previous Gaidens. Between the single-style approach, and this game being packaged with a remake, just like what happened with the Majima saga, I have to wonder how long this campaign will really be. We've obviously seen that an analog to the Akame network would be present, via the hilariously titled Kanda damage control system, but I hope this Gaiden breaks yet another pattern from the previous entries by doing away with a filler-oriented Chapter 2, as was tied with the Akame network and pirate activities. Brief side note, but apparently Kiwami 3 will also have a point system present, so thank you Snowiest for pointing this out. Back to Mine, another thing that caught my eye is the approach to the combat-adjacent side activities. We seem to have a Colosseum set up much closer to the man who erased his name, but alongside it, RGG also repurposed the dungeons from the turn-based entries into a gauntlet I can only imagine to be something like a continuous long battle, but with extra items to find. Honestly, this could turn out really well, assuming we keep with the encounter structure from Pirate Yakuza's long battles, rather than sequencing all of the individual fights, like in LJ and the first Gaiden. Mine will obviously have his own take on classic side activities, as he's even shown singing Bakamitai, and considering how the spin-off will only feature Kamurocho, this can either indicate a more concisely written story, or more unique side activities present to make Kamurocho feel livelier than ever. Given that there is no castle-esque map here, we could see a lot more polish on this spin-off all around, so I might actually play this before Kiwami 3, when the game releases. To wrap up this section, the general tone of the spin-off feels a lot more gritty, or even edgy, as some people have pointed out, which is a massive plus to me. And it might actually help some people who didn't click with a game like Pirate Yakuza remember that the series still has that recognizable old-school feel to it when RGG chooses to showcase it. Lastly, there's been a number of smaller announcements made, like the fact that Yakuza 0 Director's Cut, Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2 will be releasing on non-Nintendo systems in a presumably updated manner. I obviously had experience with Kiwami 1 on the Switch, but I'm not sure if K2's new release will finally have it run at 60 frames per second on a console, so we'll have to see what happens on that front. As for Director's Cut, I've already shared my thoughts on some of the creative choices surrounding the new cutscenes, so the brunt of my time with this release will be focused on re-unlocking the complete movesets in the main game, alongside finally getting to try the multiplayer mode. These entries will release on December 8th, coinciding with the franchise's 20th anniversary, while the combo of Kiwami 3 and the Mine saga will launch on February 12th. That about wraps up all of the major announcements. And while we've also seen bits of behind-the-scenes footage for Stranger Than Heaven, and were shown another live-action adaptation of Yakuza 1's story, I think this is a good place to conclude the video. Let me know your thoughts surrounding this event, and which parts of it piqued your interest. Thank you for watching, as always. So, until next time, take care of yourselves, and have a great day. Cheers!